that, and I started off by saying that the 7th year is apparently the golden year for accidents to occur. Often what's happened over the period of time is we become complacent in business. We do it, we stretch the rules, but what you're really playing when you do that is just odds. An accident will occur. It's not a question of whether it will or not. It will. It's just when. And if you go long enough, it will statistically occur. So the inspector also observes a hazard in the course of their daily activities. You're up on roofs often, or you're in the middle of the field doing farm installations, so you're pretty visible. And the kinds of things when an inspector is going to and from wherever they're going, they likely have a strong chance of seeing you at work, and the potential for them to stop and do an inspection is relatively high. On initial contact, now this is just so that you know that some inspectors, of course, can be very direct, but this is what we expect inspectors to do when they show up. Introduce themselves, identify their legal authority, provide general information regarding inspection and enforcement, and provide contact information. We have a policy and procedure manual which guides their day-to-day operations. We also have a provincial program advisory committee which I chair, which talks about inspector consistency. So an inspector who wants stair towers versus an inspector that will allow ladders versus an inspector that wants you to cut a hole in the roof and use a hatch. These are the kinds of things that we discuss, and we try to promote consistency. Now, how many of you met an inspector? Okay, friendly bunch? Yes, not so much? How did you know they were an inspector? Oh, I got a blue hat. But a Canadian here and get one. My point is you should ask an inspector to see their ID. So our inspectors all have to produce ID. They all have them. I have it too because I'm an inspector as well. When you ask to see an inspector ID, this is what they will show you. Now the reason I'm making the point of that is we actually have people in the province of Ontario going around pretending to be inspectors. Part of that is really industrial espionage because they're going into industrial plants and seeing what's going on. But part of the other thing that is being done is some of them are going and saying, you need training. Oh, and by the way, here's where you can get it. Yeah, exactly. So we will prosecute these people if we find them. So please let us know if you actually encounter anyone like that. In the last year, we've only found one, so they're pretty evasive, but they do exist. Orders to comply. When you get a written direction from an inspector, all right, I want to make it clear so we understand what this is. An inspector finds that you're contravening part of the legislation. So we'll make it simple again. They're not wearing hard hats on the project. That's a contravention. They will issue you an order saying you must wear hard hats at all times, something like that. That is not a recommendation. That is not a guideline. That is not a suggestion. That is a legal order to your company, to yourself, that you must comply with. If you fail to follow that order, that's a separate charge against you yourself, in addition to whatever was gone wrong before. So often, an inspector will issue orders where things are so unsafe, called a stop work order. And you have to get the job done, so that there's a pretty big temptation to just wait until the inspector leaves and then continue on. Don't do it. Not only is it unsafe, but it's illegal. In the event of something like that, inspectors will always charge you if you work against a stop work order. I hesitate to say always, but I mean it's very sound. Yes?
I was just wondering about the inspections. Is the company given an appointment, or you just go in there and inspect and try to catch whatever?
Yeah, that's a good point that you raised there. Okay, so there is no prior notification, nor will we give prior notification. An inspector has authority under Section 54 of the Act to enter any workplace at any time without warrant. And they have a number of powers under 54 which they will use. If we were to give appointments, I'm sure everything would look very good when we got there, but we just don't do it. So on the other hand, we're not, although it sounds sort of like we're out to grab you and then take you to court, that's really not what we're trying to do. When we, for instance, when we do blitzes, we always announce them in advance. So if you look on our website, you know we're going to be looking at falls in the month of. So it's not about catching people, but it's about promoting compliance. Some people need a different approach. I have to say that's quite clear. So by policy, inspectors will not issue an order covering the entire province, so you won't get an inspector issuing an order to the solar panel industry that you must do this. They will issue it to your firm directly. And orders from an inspector are either carried out forthwith, which means immediately, if you can do it, like putting your hard hats on might be one, if everyone had a hard hat, or time-based, so the inspector gives you 2 weeks or a day or some time in the future to do it, and then finally the stop work order, which is until you actually fix it. Inspectors have all of these powers under 54. This is only a portion of them, but if you get the act and read them, you'll see what I mean. Inspector may require to give it with drawings, specifications, licensing documents, and so on. So that's all something that the inspector can require. They can tell you, cause you to test any equipment, machine, device, biological, chemical, at the workplace or part is not disturbed. They can actually say that, usually during investigations. They can ask for the production of any materials concerning the frequency of manual instruction. They can attend a training program, observe it that you're putting on. They can ask you to prepare a report from an engineer at your expense to show something was unsafe. So it's inspector has quite a bit of authority under the Act to do their job. And if you want to muck completely with an inspector, so usually prosecutions are only undertaken where there's a serious contravention, but actually anything that you convene under the Occupational Health and Safety Act could result in a charge by an inspector and a prosecution by the Ministry of Labor. So as a corporation, every offense that you're charged with, that you're convicted with, is a potential of $500,000 fine. Now, naturally, if you're charged with failing to wear hard hats, it's very unlikely the court system is going to hand out a $500,000 fine. But fines where a worker has been killed have recently approached $400,000, so it's certainly a very high potential. As a supervisor, or actually as anybody who's a supervisor or worker, it's $25,000 maximum, and or you're in jail. There have been very few people actually sent to jail under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, but the potential still exists. And more than likely what you would run across is this lower level prosecution, which is at the bottom, the Part 1 summons and tickets. So these are from a schedule of offenses under the Prevention Offenses Act. For instance, hard hats is $195. There is a ticket for workers not wearing fall protection and so on. I urge you to take a look at those. Those tickets, when you get them, they're just like a traffic ticket you could get. You can send the money in and plead guilty, or you can make an appointment to appear before a judge and argue your case. As of April 1st, there's an early resolution process that's going to begin where you'll be able to meet with the prosecutor, or actually I understand meet by phone with the prosecutor, and try to do this negotiation part without actually going to court. Haven't seen it done yet, so we'll see how it works out.
Excuse me?
Yep.
If you're using subs and your subs are trained properly,
Yep.
they have their own companies, whatever, and somebody dies on the job,
Yep.
who's responsible?
They're responsible, and potentially you're responsible too.
How does that work?
Because you're responsible for ensuring that every measure and procedure is carried out in the workplace. Now, firstly, they're not going to be responsible unless there's a contravention. All right, so I'm assuming that there was a contravention of some sort. The immediate employer supervisor is responsible for ensuring workers work properly in compliance, and as a constructor, you're also responsible.
So say they don't tie down, guy falls off the roof,
Yeah.
dies. We've given him every sort of training, et cetera, he still doesn't follow the rules. We have a safety guy in place,
Yeah.
still doesn't follow the rules.
Yeah, and that's a thorny thing for anyone. I understand the challenges that you face, but what you're trying to do, Occupational Health and Safety Act is a strict liability offense. So essentially, in simple terms, you're guilty until proven innocent. What you need to do now would be argue your own due diligence. So what, you've done everything reasonable in circumstances. Sounds like what you're saying, from a reasonable point of view, is heading towards that, but the test of whether it's enough is not something I can tell you in a conversation like this. But you are moving along the right lines. We don't always hold everyone responsible. But if you had nothing in place, which is the other part, you hired somebody that had a good record, had a policy, and then you say go to it without any control, something happens, yeah, you're going to be responsible. You're going to be held accountable as well. So our outreach, our sector plans are posted. These are what we do. So if you look at our website, we announce in advance blitzes. So there's nothing that's going to be a surprise to you. We are also creating a number of videos, some of which are applicable to the kind of work you do. And you can download those videos, use them in training, view them on site. There's no charge for that. And they're on YouTube. So we're trying to promote that kind of compliance. What an inspector is